So one of the most prominent patterns when you talk about creating objects is the factory pattern. Let's talk about how it works. So in a factory pattern, the process of object creation is effectively abstracted behind an interface. Now you might be wondering that a lot of languages provide you features to just create objects right away. So why do you need this abstraction? So there are good places when you'd want to use the factory pattern. One of which is when you want to easily generate different instances of objects depending on the environment where you're in. Example, think that you are a game developer. So consider a scenario wherein you have a set of characters with different capabilities. For example, one of your characters can fight well underwater, for example, say has Aquaman like capabilities. The other character can fight well in air. So it might be a Thor or an Iron Man types of character. And the challenge for you here is to spawn or bring out those characters dynamically at runtime depending on the environment that the user has selected while starting a game. For example, if the character has selected air as an environment, you know that you can either bring out Iron Man or Thor to fight in that environment. Now let's move on to code to see how the factory pattern would make it easy to implement this problem for us. So the example that I'm going to share is going to be in JavaScript. Even if you're not friendly with JavaScript, I'd say that it's going to be easy for you to grasp the concept if you stay along. So for once, let's start with creating our character classes. So I'll have a class called Ant-Man class, and so Ant-Man can fly, yeah, but Ant-Man is not a god. True. And similarly for Thor, we know Thor can fly, but we also know Thor is a god. Cool. Now let's move on to creating our factory, which is, let's call it Avenger factory. Because you know it's going to be generating Ant-Man and Thor. And let's rename this to Thor class runner. Cool. So now what we ideally want to get is an interface method that would generate, and that when called would give us instances of Thor classes and instances of Ant-Man classes depending on what configuration we pass on. So creating the interface, let's call it Avenger factory dot prototype dot create Avenger. That's a cool name. Yeah, it has to, now this interface has to take in some option, and depending on what option it gets, yeah, and depending on if it's a god or not, it should return either Thor or Ant-Man. No, it should return it should assign the classes that we've defined here to a method of an object of this Avenger factory. So it will be Avenger factory dot prototype dot character, which the character should be from the thought class. And let's put a break statement here. And if the case is false, it should be Avenger factory dot prototype. It should be from unmanned class. Yeah. So we are assigning these classes to this character object of Avenger factory prototype so that at the end, depending on what option is passed, we can return a new instance of one of these classes. So and by default, let's just say that by default, if it's something else, not a boolean, we'll emit out, we'll assign the character object to the unmanned class. So once done, the objective of this create Avenger is to give you an instance of either one of these classes, as in one of these Einman or thought classes based on what config you pass to it. So we are going to return new this dot character. Nice. So now to use create Avenger, I need an instance of this Avenger factory, right? So what we'll do here is we'll create an Avenger factory instance Avenger factory, and now use this instance, this Avenger factory instance, and the create Avenger method on this instance to say get a Thor object. So ideally what's happening here is that we are calling this method from this Avenger factory and we are just passing in a configuration. So for our case, we just wanted to check if the environment requires a god to fight and a god to generate, our game should generate Thor instead of an Ant-Man. So to check if we have really got a Thor, okay, let's clear the console first. Let's simply check if I've got the an instance of this class using the instance of method. So I'll just end up consoling that Thor should be an instance of Thor class, and if it's true, which it is, I end up getting an instance of the Thor class by not directly calling new Thor class here, but passing a set of configuration to a factory method, which helps me in getting this object at runtime. Amazing. So yeah, so essentially this is our implementation of a factory pattern. And to sum it up, the factory pattern creates one object, it which is the Thor object in our case. It exposes a method to do so, which is the create Avenger method here, and it relies on a derived class or a subclass. So it relies on these two classes to create these methods. Simple. Hope you like this video. If so, let me know in the comments.